long.
There it is.
Nice!
Yeah!
Yes!
That's it. That's it.
We had that with time to spare.
Let's go!
Let's go.
Oh my god,
Yes.
dude!
Holy
That's
fuck.
contest mode completed, dude.
Boys, we did it. Me and my fire team, we beat Root of Nightmares on contest mode, and it was such a fun experience. I don't know why so many people are complaining. The raid was a blast. I don't know, at least me and my fire team had a blast. Maybe it was a bit on the easier side, but I don't care. I'm happy that we got the contest mode clear. But the best part of it was, I actually got the Raid Exotic Conditional Finality. This thing is a monster and it's so unique that it's the only weapon that shoots one stasis and then the next one is solar and then it freezes and it ignites. This thing is just a monster, and I decided to create a build because, you know, that's just what I do. So I made a build around this weapon with ignitions. We're also using Dawn Chorus. We're using Fireball Grenades with the artifact mods. We're also going to try out the new and improved Daybreak Super. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and hop into this build. But I know you guys like seeing my fashion, so let's go ahead and take a peek at this. I bought the Dawn Chorus ornament because that exotic is just hideous, and I went with this color scheme. I went with this armor set. So if you want to recreate this fashion, or if you want to use certain pieces, you can go ahead and screenshot this. So starting with the subclass, obviously we're going to be on Dawn Blade, which is Solar Warlock, and we're going to try the new and improved Daybreak Super. Now I believe with the release of Nightfall, they actually increase his damage by 20%. I could be wrong, but I believe it's 20%, and they also extended the duration so you can actually use more like swings, or you can shoot more fire things, whatever it is. You can use the super for longer pretty much. We're also going to use Phoenix Dive because I want to be able to have a instant way to heal myself, because this build is a really aggressive build. I mean, we're using a shotgun, so I want to be able to heal myself in an instant just in case I find myself in a bad situation. We're going to use Incinerator Snap because I like it. We're going to use Fireball Grenades. And the main reason we're using Fireball Grenades is because in the seasonal artifact, there's actually 2 artifact perks that you can get to improve Fireball Grenades. The first one is Flare Up. Fireball Grenades apply more Scorch stacks. Damaging a combatant with a Fireball Grenade spawns a fire sprite near them. This is in the 4th column in the 2nd row down. And in the last column, we have Rain of Fireballs. When you have a Fireball Grenade equipped, gain a 2nd grenade charge. So you get 2 Fireball Grenades, and now my Fireball Grenades do more Scorch stacks and spawn a fire sprite near them. And we're also using Solar Surge. Collecting a fire sprite gives you an armor charge. So you can see I want to take advantage of all these perks, which is why I'm using the Fireball Grenades. Now going back to the subclass, for our first aspect, we're going to use Touch of Flame, which actually improves the effects of our Fireball Grenades. It increases target search radius and maximum target count. So it has a big radius and it'll do more damage. Well, it'll do damage to more targets. And for our second aspect, we're using Icarus Dash just so I can get around quicker. Now when it comes to the fragments, I found that there were so many different combinations of fragments that I could use. I could use ones that are more offensive. I can use ones that will give me more healing. I can use ones that will generate orbs of power. I can use ones that will make my super do more ignitions or whatever, have better tracking. But this is the fragment loadout that I went with. Like I said, there's so many different ways you can go about this. So I'm using Ember of Eruption, so my solar ignitions have an increased area of effect. And like I said with the shotgun, the 2nd solar bullet actually ignites as long as you hit all the pellets. So that ignition is just going to have an increased area of effect. We're using Ember of Blistering. Defeating targets with a solar ignition grants grenade energy. Now my discipline is very low with this build because of the amount of ignitions I'm going to proc. I'm going to generate all of that grenade energy back by causing these ignitions with my grenades, my melee, and of course Conditional Finality. My next fragment is Ember of Ashes. I apply more Scorch stacks. Of course, like I said, I'm going to be using my super, which does Scorch damage now with Dawn Chorus. My melee and my grenade all do Scorch, so there's going to be tons of ignitions as long as I can keep stacking up those Scorch stacks. And for the last fragment, I went with Ember of Char. Your solar ignition spreads Scorch to affected targets. Now you're not really going to notice the effects of this fragment too much in lower end content, but I ran this build in a 1830 Nightfall, which I believe is legend difficulty, and the ignitions just chain to one another. You get an ignition over here, it spreads the Scorch, throw a Fireball Grenade, boom, it's going to cause another ignition, and as long as the enemies don't die, you can keep chaining those ignitions, and eventually everything's just going to blow up. Now, like I said, there's many other ways you can actually build this build. For example, you can use Ember of Mercy for more restoration when you pick up a fire sprite, which will give you more survivability. You can also use Ember of Combustion. Final blows with a solar super causes targets to ignite and creates a fire sprite. You can even go with, I believe it's Ember of Wonder. Rapidly defeating multiple targets with a solar ignition generates an orb of power. You can go with Ember of Searing. Defeating Scorch targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. Like I said, there's just so many different fragments that you can use for this build, but the fragments I chose once again were Ember of Eruption, Ember of Blistering, Ember of Ashes, and Ember of Char. Now the main weapon for this build is the raid exotic from Root of Nightmares, Conditional Finality. Now the intrinsic trait that you get on this weapon is called Split Decision. Dual barrel split into stasis and solar damage. And for some reason it says that you have 5 in the magazine when using this weapon, but I actually only have 2. The first bullet is stasis and the second bullet is solar. But the really cool part about this weapon is actually the second perk that you get on it called Paracausal Pellets. Landing nearly all stasis pellets will freeze targets, landing nearly all solar pellets will ignite targets. Which is why I chose the fragments that I did, because I want to buff up those ignitions because of how easy it is going to be to cause those ignitions with obviously Conditional Finality, and not to mention the double fireball grenades and my melee. For my primary and heavy weapon, I just went with a weapon with Incandescent, my Callous mini tool, and I went with my Regnant just because I have volatile rounds with the artifact, so I just want to use it. You can use whatever you want though. For my stats, I have 100 resilience, which I think is really important because you're going to be so close with the shotgun that you don't want to die trying to get off your damage and clear all these ads. But for your other stats, you can kind of choose whatever you want. I have 70 recovery. Maybe I should have done 100. I'm not too sure. But I also have 100 strength and I have 52 intellect. If you want to switch those things around, you can. But I really recommend using 100 resilience. So here is the screen with all of my mods. I'll leave this up for a second so you guys can screenshot it and follow along and create this build on your own. But we're going to break this down individually and I'm going to explain why I chose the mods I did. So starting off with my helmet, which is also my exotic piece of choice, we're utilizing Dawn Cores, which grants us the armor perk Rites of Ember. Your Daybreak projectiles cause targets to scorch on contact. Your scorch effects deal more damage, and you gain a small amount of melee energy each time your scorch effects damages a target. So this leads back into why I chose the fragments that I did. My ignitions are going to cause scorch, my weapons are going to cause scorch, Conditional Finality with the ignitions going to cause scorch, my melee, my fireball grenades already do more scorch stacks because of the artifact perks, Ember of Ashes causes more scorch stacks, which leads to more ignitions. And let's say I don't get an ignition, the Scorch actually ramps up and does so much damage because of Dawn Cores. My Daybreak projectiles cause Scorches themselves, so the super is even better with this exotic. This is like the perfect exotic for any type of Scorch solar based build. Now moving on to the mods, I recommend using Special Ammo Finder because you want to use Conditional Finality as much as possible. I'm also using Harmonic Siphon, which is a bit weird because this weapon technically is a stasis weapon, but it works with Harmonic Siphon even though I'm on a solar subclass. So getting those rapid solar weapon findables creates an orb of power, but it's a stasis weapon. So it's a bit funky. I think the game kind of recognizes the weapon a bit weirdly because it's both a stasis and a solar weapon. I don't know, but it works, so I'm not going to argue. And I'm also using Font of Wisdom, which will grant me a bonus to intellect as long as I have 1 stack of armor charge. This causes my armor charge stacks to decay over time. Now moving on to my arms, we're using Stasis Loader. Now, like I said a second ago, the Conditional Finality is such a weird weapon because it works with Harmonic Siphon to generate those orbs of power, but it only works with Stasis Loader. It's such a weird weapon. Now we're also using Bolstering Detonation, grant class ability energy whenever you cause damage with a grenade, and we're also using Focusing Strike, grants class ability energy whenever you cause damage with a melee attack. And in case you forgot, my class ability is Phoenix Dive, so I can get that big burst of healing whenever I find myself in a bad situation. For my chest piece, I'm just using resistance mods. I currently have Arc Resist, Melee Resist, and Harmonic Resist. Now moving on to my legs, and here's where things get interesting. So my current mod setup on my legs is I have 2 stacks of Recuperation, replenishes health each time you pick up an Orb of Power, and I have 1 Solar Weapon Surge. Again, this weapon counts as a solar weapon to get the boost in damage from Solar Weapon Surge. It doesn't work with Stasis Weapon Surge. Now, if you want to, you don't technically have to run Recuperation. You don't even have to run Solar Weapon Surge. If you find yourself dying a lot, you can just do 3 stacks of Recuperation. Or if you find yourself not dying a lot and you're able to get off all these kills and you're just nice with it, you can do 3 stacks of Solar Weapon Surge just to boost the damage up of Conditional Finality. But me personally, I went with 2 stacks of Recuperation and 1 Solar Weapon Surge. And moving on to my bond, I have 2 stacks of Bomber, which reduces your grenade cooldown when using your class ability. and I have 1 time dilation, so my armor charge stacks and decay at a slower rate. So there is the full build, guys, and I gotta say, this is probably the most fun that I've ever had on Solar Warlock. Just using the shotgun, freezing and then igniting with Dawn Chorus, just causing all these ignitions, the snap, getting it back because of more scorch stacks from Dawn Chorus. The Daybreak Super is actually pretty decent now. It's not the best, but it is much better than where it was before. So I don't know, give this build a try, guys. You're gonna like it. Hopefully you get your raid exotic. Keep clearing Root of Nightmares. It's actually not too bad off of contest mode. It's pretty easy, really easy to teach, and it's a very, very fun raid, and I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's what a lot of Destiny players forget, is that who cares if it's difficult, who cares if it's really fast, who cares if it's really long. As long as the raid is fun, that's the most important thing. So I find it fun, and hopefully you guys do too. Try this build out once you get Conditional Finality, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Deuces.